I'm Sourdough, and today I'm talking about one of my favorite shows that could use more love, Constantine. If you clicked this video in the first place, you probably already know about NBC's TV spin on the Vertigo classic, but in case you haven't heard, John Constantine is the trenchcoat-wearing, silk-cut-smoking, demon-hunting anti-hero standing between us and the rising darkness, and in order to keep doing so, he'll want some internet popularity. I'm surprised Constantine isn't bigger in the internet fangirl scene. He's male, attractive, abrasive yet sensitive, angsty yet wacky, and he's got a British accent which nicely complements his mile-wide snarky streak. Super Hulakians, or whatever you're called, take your favorite Winchester, mash him up with your favorite doctor, and you get approximately John Constantine. And if you're into shipping, there's plenty of pairing possibilities, all aided by canonical bisexuality, a trait that won't stay a just in the comics thing, according to producer Daniel Cerrone. This makes my inner fanfic writer very happy, and on a more serious note is great news for LGBT representation in television. Anyway, I'll never understand how I live in a world where season 1 of Gotham was deemed worthy of a back nine and Constantine wasn't, but enough wondering why you or your friends haven't watched yet, let's get to why you're gonna watch now. Right now, the entire first season of Constantine is available for streaming online, so now's the time to see what you've been missing. Your first instinct might be to start with the pilot, Non Est Asylum, but in the interest of garnering interest for this show, let me recommend a few alternatives. The pilot isn't a bad place to start, but it's not the best. Due to changes made between it and the rest of the series, the first episode's kind of in its own little bubble. It works to establish a character we'll never see again, goes heavier on the special effects than the rest of the series, and lays on the exposition really thick. You'll come away knowing about demons and Newcastle and the gist of what John does, but not what to expect from the rest of the show. Really, that's not bad. Pilots are hard, mostly because we're all drawn to new shows by different things. That's why I've put together this list of alternate pilots. If the first episode you watch determines whether or not you'll watch the rest, let's make sure that first episode is the right one for you. Since I made this for both newcomers looking for a place to start and fans who need to convince their friends to join them, I'm gonna keep the spoilers to a minimum. Now to count down my top 4 best starting places for Constantine. I'm putting Devil's Vinyl at the bottom of the list because, much as I liked it on first viewing, as the show improved and matured, I came to look back on this one as solidly okay. It doesn't have a lot of surprises, and its self-contained nature leaves a procedural taste in your mouth. I'm not saying it's bad, on the contrary, I think it showcases cast chemistry quite well and has some of the funnier lines of the season.
I don't do zip ties without a safe word.
I also enjoyed the lore of this episode, which focuses on a record that picked up the voice of the devil himself when he came to collect on a bluesman who sold his soul to play guitar. It's the sort of urban legend you've heard a million times, but I think that kind of familiarity can make a story feel more real. Whovians will enjoy a different kind of familiarity when they're introduced to our hero's base of operations.
It didn't seem this fake on the outside.
It's not.
Even if this episode does come off as derivative, I've always found it worth the wait to the end to get to one of my favorite scenes of the series. No spoilers, of course, but if you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about. The best thing about this one as a starting point is it's the first episode, and the only one on this list, to feature all 4 main cast members, so hit this one first if you really need to put names to faces.
Do you think I'm pretty?
If you like urban legends, this is a fun plot. But if you're that person who sits through the credits of every Marvel movie and freaked out back when Barry Allen first turned up on Arrow, you'll probably be too distracted to even notice the plot. This is the one that introduces Jim Corrigan, who, as DC geeks can tell you, is destined to become the Spectre, though it looks like he'll spend a while on Constantine as a recurring non-powered character first. This is also a good place to start if you're looking for a quick yet comprehensive rundown of who does what on the show. John, Zed, and Chaz all get the chance to show off their talents and establish what you can expect from them in future episodes. It almost feels wrong to suggest watching this one first because it's so satisfying after you've spent the previous 9 episodes wondering what the deal is with John's best friend and his survival skills. Ever since the pilot, we've known Chaz Chandler has something in his backstory his comic counterpart doesn't. But this is where we finally get to learn the juicy details. The main plot is based on the Hellblazer storyline All His Engines, where there's an unnatural epidemic of mysterious comas, and things get personal for John and Chaz when Chaz's daughter becomes one of the victims. Interspersed between scenes of the main action are flashbacks to Chaz's past, which tell the story of how he came to be the way he is. This episode is a great showcase of a character who's disappointingly scarce for much of the rest of the series, and Charles Halford's performance did a lot to make Chaz one of my favorite characters. I also love the climax of this episode. It's not what happened in Hellblazer, but it was just as badass. If you're a backstory junkie, I'm sure you'll enjoy Chaz's. It's cool and evocative and teaches us something new and important about his abilities. Don't worry that it's just Chaz who'll get the lowdown on, though. The episode begins with a quick overview of what Zed's deal is, and even includes a reference to Newcastle, so John doesn't feel left out. In this one, Manny's MIA, but it's a great episode for getting to know our human leads. Before I move on to my top pick, I'd like to do a quick honorable mention for the season's lucky 13th episode, Waiting for the Man. With its straight from Hellblazer's story, thick atmosphere, and stunning conclusion, Waiting for the Man is a beautiful episode. If this were a best episodes list instead of best starting points, it might be at number 1. However, it's the season finale, and you can't really start with the season finale, no matter how comprehensive the previously on segment is. That said, if you're a soundtrack geek and love the music of Bear McCreary as much as I do, you might just have to start here anyway. I love the soundtrack of the entire series, but this episode in particular best showcases McCreary's talent for giving us chills.
How come y'all are up so late? He lets us do whatever we want. Who does? The man.
The feature of Hosier's work song at the end of the episode was a nice touch as well. Anyway, moving on to number 1. A Feast of Friends is the 4th episode of the series, and, in my opinion, the first to show off the distinctly Vertigo vibe that sets Constantine apart from other shows. It's my personal favorite, and if I could only pick one episode to convince people to love Constantine as much as I do, I'd choose this one. Taking its story straight from the first 2 issues of Hellblazer, it starts off the way a lot of heartache does. An old friend comes to town asking for help with a situation already well out of hand.
It's bad, John.
This part-time exorcist and full-time junkie is Gary Lester. His most notable accomplishments prior to unleashing a vicious demon in a major population center include helping John screw up Newcastle and going on a bender so intense he accidentally ended up in Sudan.
I don't even know how, but next thing I know, I'm in Sudan.
I've already made a couple of references to Newcastle, and since it's one of the first things you'd learn in the pilot anyway, I don't think it really qualifies as a spoiler to stop and explain what it is. Both in-universe and in fandom for Hellblazer and Constantine, Newcastle is often used as a shorthand expression for an incident in John's backstory that happened there. To tell the story briefly, John and a gang of 6 friends we like to call the Newcastle crew tried to do what most would call the right thing in what most would call the wrong way, and due to John's overestimation of his skill with the occult, ended up accidentally damning a little girl to hell. This story is a cornerstone of both John's characterization and that of other members of the Newcastle crew, and need-to-know background if you're going to get into Hellblazer or Constantine. In Feast of Friends, we get a more detailed account of the incident from Gary, and the episode milks a lot of emotional mileage from his guilt. The actual pilot does something similar with Richie Simpson, another member of the Newcastle crew, but Feast of Friends integrates the backstory with the present plotline in a way that makes it a better pilot than the pilot.
I knew what I had to do. This was my chance to make up for Newcastle. This is my chance to atone.
If you've read Hellblazer or watched this before, you know where this is going, and you also know that knowing makes it that much more heart-wrenching to watch. If you're a Hellblazer fan who's worried about how the show will live up to the comics, this is where you'll want to start. That said, keep in mind, while it is the closest adaptation the show's done so far, Feast of Friends is not a panel-for-panel remake of the Hellblazer storyline it's based on. However, I think the episode makes a great case for why it doesn't have to be. The biggest difference between Hellblazer and Constantine is their respective distances, timeline-wise, from Newcastle. For John in the comics, it's been about 10 years by the time Gary comes calling, while for John on the show it's only been a matter of months. The Newcastle crew in the comics isn't the happiest bunch by any stretch, but they've had time to adjust to the guilt in a way that their TV counterparts haven't. This makes the character arcs of the TV versions different, yes, but in a way that's compelling and interesting and makes me want to see more. This is what puts Feast of Friends at #1 for me. It convinced me both to read the comics and stick around to see what else this show has in store for the Newcastle crew. Note that I've also recommended this one for the Gorehounds. Fair warning, this episode gets kinda nasty and is not for the faint of heart or weak of stomach. It was the first episode of Constantine I saw that reminded me I was watching the same network that does Hannibal. Of course, any fan of Vertigo comics will tell you that's exactly the way it should be. If any of these episodes looked interesting to you, be sure to catch them on Hulu while you can. And please, if you watch, do watch on Hulu or another legitimate streaming service. I know commercials are an absolute pain, but Constantine needs the viewing stats right now, so now's not the time to be a weenie about it.
Pain's good. It's how you build muscles.
So, did you find my list helpful? Do you think I missed something important? Are there other shows, movies, or comics you'd like to discuss? Let me know in the comments. I'm pretty new to YouTube, so I plan to read them all. Thanks for watching!